AITA for watching my son expose his cheating mom in court after she tried replacing me. I am 40 years old and have been married to my soon-to-be ex-wife, Sarah, who is 38, for almost 15 years. We have a 14-year-old son together, Leo, or at least I thought he was my son all these years. Sarah and I met at the marketing firm where we both worked and had been dating for only a year when she found out she was pregnant. I was a bit skeptical about having a baby so early in our relationship, but she wanted to continue the pregnancy, so I decided to support her, and we moved into an apartment together after learning the news. When Leo was born, it never even crossed my mind to get a paternity test, because Sarah and I were in love, and at that time, I was sure Leo was my son. I felt very connected to him, and he even looked like me because we both have dark hair and brown eyes, so I literally had no reason to suspect anything. However, a few months ago, I discovered that he was not actually my biological son, and Sarah had been deceiving me this whole time. About 3 months ago, she confessed to me that she had been having an affair with her high school sweetheart, Caleb, over the past few months. Even at the beginning of our relationship, she had been seeing him on the side while we were together, and she never told me because she then got pregnant. One of the main reasons she and Caleb had to break up after high school was that he was not very serious about his life and had decided not to go to college. At the time, he was still living with his parents and bouncing between part-time jobs every month. She thought she needed stability in her life, so she had chosen to be with me because I was very career-oriented. She said that by deciding to stay with me, she was betting on the winning horse, but now she had realized that money was not everything and she was in love with Caleb, so she wanted to build a life with him. Furthermore, he had had time to change and now owned his own successful construction business, so she didn't really have to worry about money anymore. When she confessed everything to me, she told me that she had taken a paternity test and had known from the start that Leo was not my son, but she had chosen to stay silent because I seemed so happy to be a father and she did not want to ruin our relationship by bringing up her past. She also made Caleb promise never to mention the affair they had because she didn't want to risk our relationship, and for her happiness, he stayed away. However, they reconnected at a high school reunion almost 6 months before she finally told me the truth, and they rekindled their relationship once again. Since he was well established and still in love with her, and she realized she was still in love with him too, she had to leave. This was a horrible time for me because I had been with this woman for so long, built a life with her, and yet she did this to me as if I meant nothing to her. Anyway, after telling me the truth, she packed up her belongings and left, but Leo stayed to live with me because he didn't want to go with her. She hadn't even consulted me before telling him the truth, and he already knew everything before I got home from work that evening. So we ended up comforting each other while crying, because our lives had been completely turned upside down. I knew that no matter what happened with the divorce, I would make sure to get at least joint custody of Leo because, regardless of his biological paternity, he was fully my son. I had raised him, and no one could take him away from me. Not Caleb, not even Sarah. I spoke to my lawyer and filed for divorce a few hours after finding out the truth. The terms of my divorce petition were quite simple and fair. I would keep the house and our shared assets, and she should not expect alimony, even though she had been a stay-at-home mom for the last 14 years since she quit her job after Leo was born. Despite all my support, she had been unfaithful. She had used me for my financial stability all the years we were together, and I wasn't going to let that continue any longer. Of course, she did not agree with this and contested the terms of the divorce, demanding alimony and a significant settlement. I was ready to fight for it. I didn't care, but she made things worse by asking for full custody 3 weeks ago. Apparently, she and Caleb were planning to move to another city to open a branch of his business there too, and he wanted to take Leo with them. I was supposed to get visitation rights, but she demanded full custody because, now, things were finally working out for them to be a happy family with Caleb, just because it was convenient for her. There was no way I was going to let that happen, and since we couldn't resolve this in mediation, the case ended up going to family court. I was pretty sure it would be a formality for me, but she and Caleb started lying openly about the kind of person I was. I had to work very hard to prove otherwise, which complicated things. Even though Leo himself said he would like to stay here with me since he grew up here, they are doing everything they can to make it seem like Leo is confused and that I am the one manipulating him. They think I am too much of a workaholic to be able to take care of him on my own, and that it would be better for him to live with his mother. There is also the fact that I am not actually his biological father, which makes all of this twice as long to resolve. Since the divorce proceedings started and Sarah moved out, we reached an informal agreement on how we would share time with Leo. Until now, we had an arrangement that he would spend the first 4 days of the week with Caleb and Sarah and come to my house on weekends. I thought this would be the arrangement we would stick to even after the divorce, but they made things much more complicated than necessary by deciding to move to another city and unexpectedly asking for full custody. So we have been stuck in a custody battle for a few weeks. When we were in family court the other day, Leo said something that caused a huge uproar. It was the first time he was actively involved in the legal proceedings, and at one point, he said that he had wanted to stay here with me so far, and that he was going to stick with that decision, not only because his life was here, but also because he had heard Sarah and Caleb talking on the phone with their lawyer the day before. He had overheard Sarah and Caleb discussing how they were going to paint me as the villain, and they had made up a bunch of lies that he started to mention, much worse than what they had come up with before. Before that, they had only claimed that I was too much of a workaholic and didn't have enough time for Leo, that I brought work home, and that most of the time when I was home, I locked myself in my office and was always busy with work stuff, even on weekends. They had also claimed that I barely cared about how Leo behaved at school and that I hadn't attended a single parent-teacher conference since he was born, leaving all that to my wife because I found it boring and never showed interest in his life. These things were easy to disprove, but apparently, Leo had heard that they planned to escalate the accusations and really make it look like I was mistreating him by saying that I hit him and yelled at him for the slightest mistake. Apparently, they thought Leo would be afraid to speak up in court in front of me, and maybe, that way, they could get temporary preventative custody of him and eventually manage to turn him against me, which would make things easier for them. That is why he wanted to get ahead of it and clarify that he had never been mistreated by me, and that if anyone was mistreating him, it was Sarah and Caleb. By involving him in this custody battle and using him as a pawn just to get revenge for my divorce filing that left Sarah with absolutely nothing. Even though my request was fair since she had never earned anything for herself and had the audacity to be unfaithful despite her heavy dependence on me, she thought she deserved the alimony and the settlement she was demanding, and planned to use Leo's custody as leverage against me to reach a divorce agreement. On the phone, Leo had heard Sarah say that once they got the settlement money, she would invest in Caleb's business and take it to new heights. They were practically overflowing with joy while discussing this, so their volume was probably the last thing on their minds. Unfortunately, they had forgotten to consider that, at that moment, Leo was with them and hadn't returned to my house yet. They had been quite loud, and he was right outside the door and had heard everything. After Leo exposed Sarah and Caleb, no one knew what to do, and the session had to be suspended because our lawyers raised their voices, and we ultimately had to leave early. I was quite satisfied because, after Leo spoke, I turned to look at Sarah, and she literally had her head in her hands and was pulling her hair so hard I thought she was going to rip it out. That simply meant all of it was true and she was in trouble. I was happy with the turn of events, and instead of going home with Sarah, Leo decided to come with me, and we drove back together, but she was furious. She stopped us right as we were getting into my car in the parking garage, grabbed Leo by the arm, and started shaking him, demanding an explanation as to why he had done such a thing in court and ruined their chance of him living with her and Caleb. When I saw her shaking him, I lost my patience. I went up to her, stepped between them, and pushed her back so she couldn't touch him. Fortunately, my lawyer filmed everything on his phone, and we will use that in our next session. I told her to let go of Leo and said that it was her own fault for being such a despicable person. I was glad Leo took my side because he wasn't a spineless, spoiled, and greedy monster like her. I was already angry enough about how she was treating Leo, especially after what I had found out in court. I was in no mood to let that continue. Caleb came to her rescue and started yelling at both of us, mostly about everything she had done for our family, and how now we couldn't even give her a real chance to be happy with him. I had no interest in talking to this guy, so I rolled my eyes and started getting into the car, but then Sarah kept holding Leo's arm and said she wouldn't let him go home with me because I was brainwashing him against his own mother. She told me that until now she had only fought for full custody, so she could take Leo with her and Caleb when they moved, but now she would make sure I didn't even get visitation rights. Bold words coming from someone who had just been exposed as a liar and who had planned to lie in court to get money she didn't deserve. I told her to let go of Leo or I would call the police, and she said she was his mother and had the right to dictate where he went. Even Leo was trying to break free, but she held on tightly and insisted she wouldn't let him go home with me. At one point, things got a bit tense. Leo is pretty sturdy and solid even though he is only 14. Sarah, on the other hand, is small and not very strong, so Leo did what he could. He pushed her very hard to break free, got into the car, and locked the door. After he pushed her, she started screaming at the top of her lungs that I was encouraging her son to attack her and that she would not allow that to happen. I found it unfair to say that because he hadn't attacked her, he had merely tried to break free. In the process, she might have been shoved a bit and could have fallen, but Caleb was there to catch her, so nothing serious happened. Well, apparently not, because she and Caleb kept standing in front of our car, saying she would make sure I lost custody of him if I encouraged Leo to be violent towards others just because things weren't going my way, making me definitely unfit to be a parent. It wasn't until I honked the horn for so long that it gave out that they finally cleared the way and let us go home. It has been a few days now, and I am still wondering if it was the right thing not to scold Leo for pushing his mother. He seems completely oblivious to it all, but I am now in a dilemma because, that day, he definitely pushed Sarah quite hard, and he is very strong. I don't want him to repeat this kind of behavior with anyone else, but under these circumstances, I think he was justified in doing what he did. Regardless, I am confused about whether Sarah was right or not, because Leo has had issues with physical altercations in the past, so was I the bad guy for not scolding my son for pushing his mom? Update 1. Some of you asked why I mentioned that Leo had issues with physical altercations in the past. It's because a few months ago, he was having bullying problems at school. He hadn't told us about it, but one day, we received a call from the principal's office saying Leo had been in a fight and was hurt. The boy who had punched him in the face was even more hurt. Apparently, this boy had been bullying Leo for several weeks. Leo initially ignored him, but when the bully crossed the line by insulting our family, Leo did not like that. He told the boy to stop several times, but since he didn't, and even tried to vandalize his locker with insults, Leo simply snapped and hit him. So there was a fight in the hallway. Obviously, I told Leo that violence was never the answer because I didn't want him getting into fights or trouble, but in a way, I was proud of him for standing up for himself. I guess Leo has never been violent unless the situation demanded it, and I think that's a good thing. Even in this situation with his mother, he was just trying to break free. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. Sarah misinterpreted the situation and is trying to use it against us, but I am not going to second-guess myself. It has been a week since the incident, and tomorrow we have to meet. First, we will meet with our lawyers to settle the divorce, and then we will meet in court for Leo's custody. After the revelation during our session, I highly doubt they stand a chance. Tomorrow could be the day we finally turn this page and decide what's next. Regardless, my lawyer and I have gathered all possible evidence to prove I am a good father, and we look forward to winning. More importantly, Leo's words will matter the most. He has clearly expressed that he does not want to live with his mother. This isn't just because he doesn't want to move. It's because she is a terrible person, just like Caleb. They will never be able to raise him properly, and we definitely don't need another person like them. I spoke to Leo a few hours ago, and he told me he was very nervous because it would be the first time he'd see his mother after pushing her to get away. He knew she was very angry about it. He confessed to me that he tries very hard not to care what she thinks, but at the end of the day, she is his biological mother. We spent so many years together as a family that it is hard to accept the truth now. He told me he was really afraid of what would happen if, by some stroke of luck, he ended up with Sarah and Caleb. I assured him that wasn't going to happen. I would go to any court in the world to make sure that doesn't happen and that he can stay with me. He is my son. Nobody cares about a stupid paternity test. If I say he is my son, then he is my son. That seemed to relieve him a bit, but I can tell the whole situation has affected him. I don't even know how I will handle the situation if I get custody of him, how we recover from this, because eventually his mother will leave town and move in with Caleb. I am pretty sure that after everything that has happened, she won't be willing to see Leo again if she doesn't get custody of him. she's just that kind of person. I don't want him to lose his relationship with his mother because I don't want him to hate me in the future. Anyway, we are heading out, and maybe tomorrow won't be the final day of this case. But for my sake and Leo's, we really hope it will be. Update 2. Hi, something very strange just happened. It is almost 4 a.m. and I was sleeping, but about an hour ago, someone rang the doorbell. When I went to open it, there was no one outside, just a brown envelope left on the doormat. I even checked the security cameras, but the person who left it was dressed entirely in black with the hood up, so I couldn't identify them. However, they were taller than 5 feet, so it couldn't be Sarah, and they seemed to be either quite heavy-set or wearing a very bulky hoodie. Anyway, I don't think it was Caleb either, and those are the only 2 possible options. What I found inside the brown envelope surprised me greatly. It was the results of a paternity test, and surprisingly, they were positive. The results came from the same lab where we had taken the test a few months ago. When Sarah told me Leo wasn't biologically my son, she had shown me results saying Leo and I were not a match. I took the test 3 times just to be sure it was true, and all 3 times, the results were the same. I had finally accepted the truth, but the results I just received state that Leo and I are a match. So now I am very confused. I don't know which results are fake and which are real. To be honest, it was very hard for me to believe that Leo wasn't my son because we look a lot alike and I never had the feeling he wasn't my boy. Whoever sent me these results is trying to confuse me a day before our meeting to decide on custody. Or maybe there is something I have overlooked this whole time. Perhaps Sarah and Caleb committed paternity fraud or something like that. I just called the lab, but obviously they didn't answer because they probably aren't even open yet. However, the first thing I will do tomorrow is go and verify in person, because this is really confusing and I have no idea what to do right now. However, I have already spoken to my lawyer about this, and we will figure out a solution tomorrow. First, we need to make sure these results are real, so I am going to take the test again, but this time I won't say anything to Sarah about it. I don't know why, but I have a lingering feeling that I will definitely get answers tomorrow if I confront Sarah with these results. Update 3. Today was a very long day. First of all, I went to the lab with Leo and my lawyer to demand an explanation regarding the results I received last night. Before I could ask any questions, a man who seemed to be in charge pulled us aside and told us it was him. Last night, he was the one who had delivered the envelope, but he didn't expect me to show up. He explained that during the first test, Sarah and Caleb had already spoken with him. After researching and finding the lab used by the court, they had agreed with him to alter the results and show them as negative, so she could claim Leo wasn't my son and try to take him with her. Apparently, she had assumed that once I found out Leo wasn't my biological son, I would abandon my role as a father and leave them alone. However, when that didn't happen, after seeing the test results for the first time and coming back for 2 more tests, she asked this man to help her and falsify the results twice more. All of this was done behind our backs, and she had promised him she would make him a partner in the business once she got the money from our settlement. He was hoping for that, which is why he helped her 2 more times by forging the paternity test results each time. I was stunned to learn this, as I never would have believed she'd be capable of doing such a thing. Regardless, he eventually changed his mind because he had been in contact with Sarah all this time and had heard what happened in family court the last time we met. She must have told him that things were taking longer than expected and that he wouldn't be able to start their business for another few months, so he would have to wait. He decided he could no longer continue to help her because it was clearly very immoral and unethical, so he decided to deliver this document to me last night. He apologized for all the trouble he had caused and practically begged me not to involve him in all this because he really wanted to remain anonymous. I was upset because this man, who didn't even know me, had wronged me a few months ago just for money, and I really wanted to report him. But that would only have meant more trouble for me, and I didn't have the energy for it. Maybe if he repeats this kind of behavior someone else will report him, but until then, I'll pass. Besides, I already had the necessary documents to prove my paternity, so I didn't care what happened to him. If it came down to it and I needed something in court, I would certainly use it as evidence and report him. However, for now, I had another plan in mind. After that, I went to the courthouse, but before sitting down at the table for our divorce settlement meeting, I pulled Sarah aside. She was quite surprised by this move. I told her that I had received this document last night, and that these were the real paternity test results, so she immediately understood I knew about the fraud she had committed. At first, she tried to play innocent, but I told her that paternity fraud is a serious matter and that I would give her one chance to walk away from all this without further trouble if she accepted the terms of my filing this time and also gave up her parental rights to Leo. She agreed to the first part, but the second part did not please her, and she tried to negotiate with me, saying she was his mother and couldn't just let him go. However, I didn't believe a word of it and told her that no mother in the world would do such a thing to her own child. So now she could either do what I asked or face a lot of problems. After arguing with me for almost 10 minutes, she finally agreed, and I felt like I had won. Following that, I finally managed to reach a settlement, and my lawyer and I were thrilled because she had accepted the terms of the petition. After that, we just had to wait for our final confrontation in family court, and there, things went exactly as planned. She wasn't happy about it, but she agreed to sign away her parental rights to Leo and walk away. This took everyone by surprise because she had been fighting fiercely for his custody over the last few weeks, and suddenly she gave up. So it seemed a bit strange, but I didn't care. I had won. Leo, my lawyer, and I finally took our leave and got home a few hours ago. In a few days, my lawyer will have drawn up the paperwork, and she will have finally surrendered her rights. Then, it will just be my son and me against the world, although I think that has been the case for the past few months. But I am eager for all this to be officially over, so we can finally try to move on because all of this has been very intense. For now, Leo is extremely happy with the outcome, and so am I, so we are just trying to enjoy the situation. Update 4. It has been a little over 4.5 months since the last update, and I am now fully divorced and living with my son. This has been extremely beneficial for us, as we got rid of the toxicity of my ex-wife. Even Leo is happy not to have to see her anymore, because he had started to hate her for what she did. Leo recently turned 15, and although many people congratulated him and attended his birthday, his mother didn't even bother to send him a message. That shows she never really cared about him. Anyway, I didn't reactivate my account just to tell you that, but to update you on my ex-wife's situation and also to answer some questions. One question I saw asked often last time, which I left largely unanswered, was about legal action against the lab employee and also against my ex. But as I already explained, and this is why I didn't answer, I was tired of all these legal processes. I just wanted a quick way out of all this and I took it. Some people might have expected revenge and such, but the truth is that being dragged through court for months is not pleasant, so the best thing was to put an end to all this and get back to my normal life, especially for Leo, who was also affected by it all. Ultimately, I firmly believe that karma always catches up with everyone, so sooner or later my wife will get her punishment, just like everyone else who wronged me. Though this update is also somewhat about that, because my ex received a sort of divine punishment, if you will. Caleb finally decided to cut her off from everything because after they failed to get any money from me, which would have helped open a new branch of his business, he did not want to share his company with her. It is quite poetic because she did not want to be with him when he had nothing, and now he didn't want to be with her when he was finally established. So now, my ex-wife had to look for a job, something she wasn't really used to doing. Not only did she lose a husband and a child, but also her lifestyle. But that's what happens when you do bad things in life, at least in this case. And if you are wondering how I know this, no, I haven't gotten back in touch with her or anything like that. We just have mutual acquaintances who were able to tell me all this. Fortunately, she hasn't shown up at my door or tried to contact us, and since it's been a while now, I don't think she will either. Comment. Thank you all for spending your time with me today and following this journey. Sometimes, the hardest battles we face are not meant to be won through revenge, but by finding our own peace. Walking away from a toxic situation takes immense courage and a deep sense of self-respect. Protecting the ones we love means prioritizing their safety and emotional well-being over our own anger. Holding on to resentment only ties us down to a painful past. Stepping away from drama allows us to rebuild a life founded on trust and genuine care. Blood does not always define family, but unconditional love and steadfast responsibility certainly do. Healing takes time, yet creating a healthy environment for ourselves and our children is always worth the effort. I hope this inspires you to set strong boundaries and protect your peace, no matter what happens around you. Please take care of yourselves and remember to choose the path of healing every single day. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.